Hello and welcome, it's Chris here. This is part 3 of 4 where my friend Stuart Lynch will show you how to create an app on multiple platforms. If you've missed the previous parts, don't worry, there's a playlist right over there that you can check out. And if you do enjoy these lessons, do check out Stuart's YouTube channel as well. Alright, let's dive in.
Hi, my name is Stuart Lynch, and in this video we're going to be extending our Dad Jokes application even further. Currently we have a macOS target for the menu bar version and an iOS target for the iPhone iPad version. In this video we're going to be adding another new target to our app. We're going to create a widget using WidgetKit. This widget will use a WidgetIntent to allow users to choose which type of joke they want displayed on the widget, and we'll use the WidgetTimeLine to refresh the joke every 30 minutes or so. As with an iOS target, we're going to be using a lot of the same code that we used in the Mac and iOS app. I highly recommend that you watch those first 2 videos of this series, as each one builds on the previous one. If you completed the iOS version, you can continue on from there, or you can use the completed version of that second video that you can download from the link in the description. If you've never created a widget before, I recommend that you watch the series created by Flo and is available on the CodeWithChris channel. You can find the link in the description. I also created a series on the CodeWithChris Plus offerings called Ribbons that builds out a full WidgetKit solution and includes intents, which is something that's not covered in Flo's course. In this video, I'll be relying on that information, so be aware that this is not a tutorial on how to use WidgetKit, but can be thought of as an example of how you can add a widget to an existing app, assuming that you have some knowledge of WidgetKit. Now, the first thing that I want to do is to create a new branch before we create our target. So let's do that as we did in the last video and branch from the existing iOS branch, and we'll call it Widget. Now this widget is a new target, and that will be an extension on an iOS app. From the File menu, choose New Target and select iOS and search for Widget and choose Widget Extension. Click on Next and call it Dad Jokes Widget. And make sure that you check the Include Configuration Intent, as we'll be creating one that will allow our users to choose from the widget which joke type they want displayed. Also, make sure you activate the widget so that it is the current target. Like every target, a new folder is created with some files along with an assets folder. The joke view is not going to be of any use to us because it'll not work on a widget. However, the joke type, the joke model, and the API service will be needed, so add the widget extension as a target membership to these 3 files. What else can we use from that shared folder? We'll not be using any new assets for this target, but we do want to use the shared image of the dad, namely the Stuart Lynch image. So return to that shared folder and make sure that the shared assets folder also has the Dad Jokes widget extension as the target membership. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to be allowing our users to long press on the widget to bring up a selection list of the different types of jokes available, so that when chosen, we go off and fetch a new joke of that type. So select the intent definition file. Create a new type by clicking on the plus button and call it choice. Select the configuration and configure it as follows. The top portion is perfectly fine. The category and title are what we want, and the intent is eligible for widgets only. In the parameters section, create a new parameter and call it selected choice. And then on the right, configure it as follows. For display name, the selected choice is great. For the type, choose the new type, choice. Uncheck Siri can ask for value and run, and check options are provided dynamically. And then add a prompt, select the joke type. Now we need to create an intent handler extension. So from the File menu, choose New, Target, and then search for and select Intents Extension and click on Next. The starting point will be None, and do not include UI extension. Make sure it's embedded in the Dad Jokes iOS application, and then activate it. This intent handler is going to have access to the joke type enum, as we'll be creating an array of objects for our choices from that enum. So return to the shared folder and make sure that the joke type has this handler added as a target membership. It also has to know about the intent definition file and vice versa. So select the intent definition and make sure that the widget intent handler is also a target member. Build, and it'll generate an intent class that we can use. Select the widget intent handler target now. On the General tab, in the Supported Intents section, add the class for Configuration Intent as the supported intent. This should pop up when you remove that current placeholder intent from that field. With that done now, we can code our intent handler, which will be used in our widget. This is what will provide us with a list of choices. So to do that, we need to add conformance to configuration intent handling. This will require conformance to that protocol, so let Xcode do that for you. This generates two functions with these same signature. One has a completion handler and the other does an async throws. I'm going to use the one with the completion handler so we can remove the other one. In the body of that function, we need to create an array of those choice types that we created, and each one has an identifier that is a string and a display name. Well, our joke type has a unique type property that's a string, and a raw value that will go nicely as the display name. We can use that fact that joke type is case iterable to make each one as a joke type into a new choice, where the identifier is joketype.type and the display is joketype.rawValue. So we can let choices be equal to joke type all cases, where we'll now iterate over each of the joke types in that array and create a new choice object which has the identifier that is our joke type and the display being the joke type raw value. Our completion handler requires an intent object collection and an error. Well, that object collection is just all of our choices. Then for our completion, we can pass in that along with nil for the error. Great. We have everything we need now to code our widget. This is the entry point for our widget. And we can see that because there is an appMain attribute. So let's rename that file as widgetEntry in the navigator, as I've done before. Now, the preceding content here are all of the support structs. I'm going to keep the dadjokes_WidgetKit entry view struct here because it is used directly and we'll be able to design our widget right here in this view. But I'm going to move all of the other supporting structs into a new file. So create a new file and call it widget support. And make sure that the target is the dadjokes widget extension. Import WidgetKit. And then paste in those structs that you cut out from that first file. You'll get an error in the getTimeLine function because the timeline doesn't understand what the entry is. Well, what it is the simple entry. So change it to that struct type. Now the simple entry struct is where we gather the data that we can use for our widget. It currently includes a date that will be updated, a configuration intent that will tell us what type of joke to present, but we are missing one crucial thing, and that's the actual joke. So we'll need to add one more property to our simple entry, and that is a joke of type joke. This creates an error in each of the three timeline provider functions. We can fix all of those at once by using the Control-Option-Command-F keyboard shortcut. And the additional argument is added to the constructor for the simple entry instance that is in each of those three functions. Now the placeholder function gets called by WidgetKit when it first displays your widget, and it shows redacted information if there's no previous entry. Well, the method synchronously returns an instance of our simple entry timeline entry. With the call being synchronous, we need to return data quickly, so we should just use our sample data until our main timeline method has been called to return real data. Well, we don't have any sample joke to work with, so let's create one. Open the joke model and create a static property and call it placeholder. And we can create a new instance. And from the API, we could see that the status will always be 200 and a response is always going to be success. For the joke, we can make one up. It's like something like, what did the ocean say to the shore? Nothing. It just waved. And the type is dad joke followed by a colon and then a space. I don't know why the API does that, but for all of the types, it always has a colon and a space afterwards. And then we can return then to the widget support and to the placeholder function, add for the simple entry joke property, we can just use that static placeholder. The next two functions will use our configuration intent, which is where we choose what type of joke to fetch. If we take a look at our intent, it's called configuration, and there is a parameter that is a selected choice. The handler that we created generates an array of these choice types formed by the joke type enum. The identifier is the raw value, which is what we send to the API, whereas the display string is what is presented to the user as a choice. So let's create a function that we can use for both of our two next functions that will have the configuration intent as a parameter, but returns a string that will be the intent's identifier that can be used in our call to the API. So we can do a guard check to see if one was chosen, else we'll return the dad joke type as a default. If it has been, then we'll set that return type and return it. The getSnapshot function gets called by the WidgetKit when the user is previewing your widget in the widget gallery. This method asynchronously returns an instance of our simple entry timeline entry representing the current time and state. While the function is asynchronous, it is still important to be timely with the response given that the user is looking to add your widget to their home screen. The URL will be the same one that we used in the Mac and iOS app. So if we return to the joke view now, we can find it here. So let's copy it to our clipboard. Back in Provider, let's first get a joke type that we can call type that uses our function and passes in the configuration that is our function parameter. When we have the type then, we can paste in that URL that we copied, which uses the same variable name. Next, we can create an instance of our API service passing in that URL. Then, we can create an asynchronous unit of work called a task to fetch our data. We'll use a do-catch block to try and await for the API service to use the getJSON function and convert it to a joke. If we find it, we can then move our letEntry and completion blocks into here because we now have a joke that can be used for our entry. If it fails, then we can copy the entry and completion blocks from our do code, but change the joke to simply be our placeholder joke. The getTimeLine function gets called by WidgetKit when the widget gets added to your home screen. And then it gets updated by the interval that we specify. And that function returns an array of timeline entries, meaning you can return the current entry as well as any future entries to be displayed on the widget. Well, we're going to only fetch one at a time, so our array that we're going to be returning is just going to be a single entry in that array. And that function is very similar to the getSnapshot function, except that we'll need to specify a timeline and frequency to fetch a new one. So we'll still need the type, the URL, and the API service. So let's copy that from the getSnapshot function. Now I'm going to delete all the code in the getTimeLine and construct it from scratch. So now let's paste in what we copied. Next, we'll need to know the current date along with an entry date that we can use the next time to fetch a new joke. So I'm going to set that to be 30 minutes after the current date. So first, we'll let current date equal date. Then we can add a new entry date using the calendar.current.date by adding minutes to our current date. So we'll use a value of 30 minutes to the current date. The closure requires a new timeline entry for our simple entry. So we'll need to create another asynchronous task unit and recreate the process of fetching an entry. And we do that with a doCatch block as above, where we can fetch a joke. And if we can't, we'll let the entry use our placeholder just like above, so we can copy from there. Now in both cases, we'll need to create a timeline entry and use that for our completion block. The array of entries will be our single entry, and then the policy will be that we'll fetch it after the entry date. The entry date's optional, so let's go back and unwrap it. This won't fail, so it's safe to do this. Remember that entry date now is going to be 30 minutes from the last date. Then we can call the completion function passing in that timeline. The catch case will be exactly the same because it will always have that placeholder entry. One more thing I like to do for readability is to change that instance of date to the static now property in both functions. So 4 changes. Now it's time to design and present our widget. So return to the widget entry file. We see that we're getting an error in our preview, so let's fix that by passing in the placeholder and also change the preview content family to system medium, because that is the only size that we're going to be supporting. In the dad jokes widget struct, we'll need to do a couple of things. First, I need to specify that we're only supporting the system medium family. And we do that by adding the supported families function, and that asks for an array, so our array will only have that single system medium entry case. I'm going to change the display name to be Dad Jokes Widget. And then for the description, I'll say, put a smile on your face. And this is what's going to be displayed in the gallery when we choose the widget. It's the widget entry view where we design our widget. And right now it's displaying a text view with the entry date. And we don't want that. We want to display the joke, and we know that the entry will be provided us with a joke. In our layout then, we want to display an image on the left, and then on the right we'll show the type of joke, and beneath it the actual joke. So start with an H stack and set the alignment to center. create an image, and we'll use our shared Stuart Lynch image. Make it resizable. Set the aspect ratio to content mode fit. And then create a frame with a width of 100. Next, we'll create a divider that's going to be a vertical line separating our image with the joke to follow. So next then we'll create a V-stack with the alignment leading. And as the first entry on top, I'll create a text view that will use our entry.joke.type as the title. But you may recall that the type here always ends with a colon and a space. So I'd like to drop the last two characters. And then let me set the font to headline small caps. And then below that, then in the V-stack, we'll create the text view with the entry joke, and the joke itself is the joke property. I'll set the font to be of type title, but I'll set a minimum scale factor of 0.5 in case it's too long. And I'll also add a spacer to push everything up to the top of the V-stack. This looks pretty good, but white's boring. So I want to add a gradient background, much like I have for my icon. So let's embed this H-stack then in a Z-stack or a Z-stack. And then the first item in the Z-stack will create a linear gradient. For the colors array, we can use black as the first item, and then we'll use a color of dark gray as the second item of the array. And then the starting point will be the top, and the ending point the bottom. Well, in order to see our text then, we'll have to set the foreground color to white. Let's also add some padding. That looks pretty good. Now we need to test it. Now I've found with the latest version of Xcode 13, widgets in the simulator have been rather buggy. So I found that the best way to test this is to set the target to be the Dad Jokes iOS target and select an iPhone like the iPhone 13 Pro and then run the app. After the app has loaded, exit to the home screen and then long press on the home screen and tap the plus button. In the simulator, you're going to have to search for the widget and search for dad jokes. If you select that, you'll see that you have the one and only dad joke medium widget, and it will fetch and retrieve a joke using the getSnapshot function. Tap on the Add Widget to add it to the home screen, and at this time it'll use the getTimeLine function and fetch another new joke and set it up so that it has a 30-minute or so delay later to fetch a new one and renew the joke on your home screen. If you long press on the widget and choose Edit Widget, you'll see the intent that will allow you to choose and select which kind of dad joke you want. The default, if you recall, was just a dad joke. So you can choose a different one and return to the home screen, and you'll get an example of that category. Now, because we fixed the background and the text color, the widget's going to look exactly the same on light or dark mode. Well, within widgets, you can add one or more of the same type to your home screen and stack them. For example, let me add another one now. It adds a new dad joke to our home screen. And since I already have a Chuck Norris one on my screen, I can simply just drag this dad joke one on top of it. When I click on Done, I now have two widgets stacked, and I can rotate between them. If I tap on the widget, it'll open the app and take me directly to the app in the iPhone. The widget will update with a new joke when that first timeline ended and 30 minutes has passed, like this. And notice that the Chuck Norris joke has updated as well. Well, that concludes this video, and we now have 3 different ways to view our jokes, either through the Mac menu bar app, or the iPhone and iPad app itself, and now on our device home screen. In the final video of this series, we'll be adding one more target, and that's going to be for the Apple Watch. I say you must always have the ability to get a new joke to brighten your day. But before you sign off, make sure that you commit your project to Git. This is always a good practice, and we'll be using this project in the next video. See you in the next one, and thanks for watching.